Hello and welcome to GCSE Infection and Response with Mrs. Castanera. This is part 1 of the booklet, and today we're looking at lesson 1, what is health, what is disease, and how does lifestyle affect them? You will find that the first few pages of the booklet are filled with revision notes to help you. Some of this is biology only. You don't need to know the biology only higher tier stuff. And then there is also a set of statements crossing over 2 pages of things you need to know to be able to pass this in the exam. As you work through the booklet, you should be able to work through these and you can check your progress periodically. There's also a list of the YouTube videos that are used in each of the lessons. So this is the lesson 1 that we're doing. So this is the YouTube video that you will find in lesson 1. So, today the lesson is called Health Issues and Effects of Lifestyle. Our key words are health, lifestyle, diet and exercise. Your first task today is to complete the knowledge check, please. Okay, let's go through that. So, the 3 types of blood vessel are arteries, veins and capillaries. The 4 chambers of the heart are the left and right aorta and the left and right ventricle. The aorta carries what type of blood to the body? That would be oxygenated blood. Identify why veins have valves. Well, this is to stop the backflow of blood. Identify why capillaries have thin walls. This is to allow for the efficient transfer of substances, such as gases like oxygen and carbon dioxide, between the blood and the tissue. Define the term stem cell. So a stem cell is an undifferentiated cell and it has the potential to grow into many different types of cells. State the 4 types of cell that make up blood tissue. That's the white blood cells, red blood cells, plasma and platelets. State the function of the mitochondria. So they are the site of aerobic respiration. Okay, please tick the answers that you got correct and give yourself a mark out of 8, please. So today we will be looking to identify the definition of health and know that diseases are often the cause of ill health. We will also be explaining the effect of lifestyle factors such as alcohol and diet on the incidence of disease. Health. Health is the state of physical and mental well-being of an individual. Someone's health may be affected by disease. That's both communicable and non-communicable diseases. So communicable means it can be transferred and non-communicable means it cannot be transferred. We will discuss these in later lessons. A person's lifestyle will also affect their overall health, By lifestyle, we mean how a person chooses to live. Okay, so the meaning of lifestyle is how someone chooses to live. To maintain their health, a person needs to be conscious of their lifestyle choices, eat a healthy, balanced diet. This means it must contain the 7 basic nutrients in their correct proportions. Okay, so what are the 7 basic nutrient groups? Well, you need to know these. They are carbohydrates, fats, fibre, minerals, proteins, vitamins, and water. One, two, three, four, five, six, 7. And that's the 7 basic nutrients, which you do need to know. You also need to have them in their correct proportions. So too much of one type of nutrient over another will not be a healthy, balanced diet. You need to exercise, or at least avoid a sedentary lifestyle. Sedentary means non-moving. Being constantly under stress can also lead to health issues, as can your socio-economic background and whether you have access to medicine or other items that will prevent illness in the first place. So this can be covered by under stress, so that is part of your lifestyle choices partly, so what job you have. It can also be things that aren't part of your choice but still part of your lifestyle. So that can lead to health issues. Socio-economic background is essentially your social status, and that's not to do with where you are on Facebook or whatever. It is to do with your relative affluence, so wealth in society, and your status within society. So are you perhaps working class? Are you part of the aristocratic class who don't tend to work? What background do you come from? It's socio-economic because the two are interrelated. Economic meaning relating to money and socio meaning related to your social status, including whether you have access to medicine. So not everybody lives in a place where there is access to medicine. So if you live in the middle of nowhere, you may not have easy access to a doctor, okay, especially if you're in another country where they don't have a lot of doctors or they don't have a lot of medicine. It depends on what country you live in. And other items that will prevent infection in the first place. So things like cold and flu remedies that help prevent you getting sick, things like the flu vaccine, which stops you getting the flu, vaccinations that prevent illness. So there's lots of other things like this. So other items include vaccinations and preventative medicines. Risk factors. An unhealthy lifestyle contains risk factors that increase the rate of disease. So risk factors. What are risk factors? They are something that increases the chances of getting a disease. Okay, so risk factors increase the rate of disease. For example, diet, smoking, and exercise can affect the cardiovascular system. Obesity is a factor in type 2 diabetes. You are more likely to get type 2 diabetes if you are obese. Obesity is having excess fat in the body. Alcohol affects liver and brain function. Okay, so alcohol destroys the liver cells and it destroys and damages brain cells. So the destruction of the liver cells is called cirrhosis, and that can be caused by alcohol. Smoking increases the risk of lung disease and lung cancer. Alcohol also blocks chemical signals between neurons alongside other drugs. Now, drugs can be the type that are prescribed to you by a doctor, or they can be the type that are not prescribed and are classed as recreational. Smoking and alcohol can affect unborn babies in utero, so that means in the womb. Nationally, there are other factors. The environment you live in can affect your health. So, for example, if you are in an area with high air pollution, such as the city of London or in the city of Birmingham, or any city really, but those are two of the worst, then the risk of asthma will increase. Likewise, if you are from a poor socio-economic background, you are more likely to smoke, drink, have a bad diet, and not exercise much. So all of these factors, these risk factors, are related to your socio-economic background. Okay, so globally, more developed countries have a higher instance of non-communicable diseases as they have access to good food and medicine. So developed countries have access to good food and medicine. So they have more of the non-communicable diseases. Okay, these are the ones that don't get passed from person to person. Underdeveloped countries have a much higher instance of communicable diseases, the type that passes from one person to the next, because they lack the food for a balanced diet and the medicine and their living conditions, and they have a lack of basic sanitation. Okay, so there's a lot of reasons there. So sanitation is the disposal of waste. So we're talking about flushing toilets, running water, sinks. We're talking about sewers. They may not have any of these things, so they may have one body of water, a river or a lake, where the drinking water comes from, where they bathe, where all their wastewater after cooking, after cleaning goes, and where all their feces and urine goes as well. So imagine drinking water contaminated with your own feces, and the water is going to be very, very dangerous to be drinking. Interaction. Sometimes diseases can interact and they cause issues that may not originally seem related. People who have problems with their immune system, such as autoimmune diseases like lupus, have an increased chance of suffering from communicable diseases, and this is because their bodies cannot defend themselves. So at the moment, we are having a global pandemic, which is the coronavirus, and people who have problems with their immune system are classed as extremely vulnerable, and that is because they do not have the ability to defend themselves properly from this communicable disease, so they have a higher chance of getting this illness. This is the same for many types of disease, so the flu, common cold, all sorts of things, lots and lots of different diseases. So we could talk about hepatitis, measles, all sorts of different diseases, and they're all passed on in different ways. So immune reactions caused by pathogens, which is disease-causing microbes, may trigger allergies like asthma or a rash. And it's quite common, in fact, I say common, but it can happen that people who have an immune reaction to a disease then go on to get asthma, rashes, hay fever, or other autoimmune conditions. Many autoimmune diseases are linked to other autoimmune diseases. They tend to come together in groups. Some viruses have been linked to cancer. such as the HPV vaccine, which girls are vaccinated against in secondary school to help reduce their risk of cervical cancer. That is due to a virus. There is also a link between severe or long-term illness and depression and mental health illness. It's quite understandable that if you are affected by an illness that is severe or long-term and affects your day-to-day living, that is potentially going to make you distressed, upset, anxious, irritable, tired, feeling overwhelmed, and a lot of other issues that can be linked to causing depression and mental health problems. So we need to talk a little bit about pathogens. There are 4 main types of pathogens you'll be expected to know. We'll talk about these in a later lesson. And the immune system is the organs that provide resistance to disease-caused infections and toxins. And there's a number of these that work together, but part of it is your white blood cells. And the spleen. They both work together as part of your immune system. There are many other parts to it, but that's part of it. Okay, so moving on to costs. The cost of disease can be measured using a parameter of human and financial. The human cost is as high as tens of millions of people who die each year. Okay, so tens of million people die each year because of disease. Okay, so that's the human cost. Financially, okay, this is all those people who are no longer able to work, they're no longer able to support their families potentially. Some of these deaths are from preventable communicable diseases. These are diseases that we have cures for or we have vaccinations to prevent. And if the medicines were accessible to the population, they would be survivable. So they're survivable if you have the medicine, but not everybody across the world has the medicine. Also, they are preventable if you improve the basic standard of living and sanitation, most importantly, of populations. There's also the emotional cost to the sufferers whilst they're ill and their families, no matter what continent they are. So there are a number of these preventable communicable diseases, and this includes HIV, hepatitis. There's several forms of hepatitis, A, B and C. Measles, salmonella, and there's many, many more. We'll just put other bloodborne diseases. And by bloodborne, we mean diseases that are carried through blood. So most commonly, these illnesses are spread via a method called fecal-oral route, which is essentially where the feces, human feces, are transmitted to the mouth of people. And that can be by not washing hands. It can be by drinking water or foods contaminated with fecal matter. There are a number of ways for this to occur. Yes, it is particularly gross, but it happens regularly. Food can be contaminated. Sexual intercourse is commonly, for example, how you get HIV and forms of hepatitis. Insect bites, for example, you can get malaria through insect bites. Contact with contaminated formites, droplets, or skin contact. Okay, so when we talk about droplets, we're talking about coughs and sneezes, droplets of water from the mouth or nose that have been passed on to other people. I've either touched it or they've touched a surface with it. So there's a number of ways to get and pass on these diseases. So the financial cost then is a huge factor in the UK because the NHS is paid for by the taxes of the working population. So financial cost is a huge factor because in the UK, the NHS is paid for by our taxes. It treats all the people. It also researches better ways of treating diseases. There are also other organisations around the world that do this. So it treats all of us, everybody, regardless of whether you have money or not. We treat everybody without a cost. And we research better ways of treating. There is the cost of adapting a home to suit a person with a specific need, which can run into the thousands. So if somebody has a horrible accident and needs to be in a wheelchair for the rest of their life, their house may not have doors wide enough for a wheelchair to access it. They won't have a way of getting up their stairs, for instance. They might need a stair lift. They might have steps going into their house at the front or the back of the house. They might need ramps putting in. There are a number of ways that all of the different things need to be adapted. They may have a bath. If you have a bath or a shower where you have to step into it, a person in a wheelchair cannot access that. They will need significant changes making in their bathrooms. So there's a number of different issues. So if someone has specific needs, and that's just a simple example. Okay, so adapting homes for people is a significant cost. Also, depending on the disease that the sufferer has, they may have to give up work, which means they won't necessarily have money coming in. And also, quite often, a family member may have to give up work to care for their relative. This is particularly common when the person who is being cared for is a child and is unable to look after themselves, especially when they're particularly young. At that point, usually one parent has to take a lot of time off work, or they may have to give up work if that's not possible. And that means that the number of people working in our country falls, and that affects the country's economy. So what I'd like you to do is have a go at this question, checkpoint. So a school suffers from an outbreak of whooping cough. Could also exchange the phrase whooping cough for coronavirus. An infectious disease spread by droplet infections or direct contact with an infected person or contaminated surface. Name 3 steps that would help the school to control the spread of the infection. Okay, so I expect you all to have a good idea about ways you would be able to control an outbreak of an infectious disease in a school. Okay, so have a go at writing 3 steps. If you're not sure about any of them, write a 4th. I'd like you to pause the video whilst you do this. Okay, so there's lots of things you can do. You can send infected children or teachers home. That way, they will not be able to transmit the disease to other people. You can prevent visitors. So new people don't come into the school. You can clean all the surfaces regularly with disinfectant or antibacterial. So antibacterial and antiviral, so disinfectants such as bleach. You can also, there are other things you could take, such as wearing a mask to prevent droplet contamination, maintaining a distance, such as the 2-meter rule. There's lots of different ways. So, and you can use something called aseptic techniques, where essentially you wear gloves after washing your hands, and then you dispose of those gloves before doing anything new. That doesn't work so well in schools. They tend to use that in hospitals. So, we can maintain social distancing. We will definitely have wash hands regularly. That would include after any kind of contact. And what was the other one? Wear appropriate mask. Okay, so if you've got any 3 of those, give them a tick. I want a mark out of 3, please. And then we will move on. Okay, so there are 2 video clips here. I'd like you to watch them both. And then I'd like you to make a note of key ideas involving health, disease and risk factors on this page here. Okay, and I would very much like you to send that to me if you can, via either a photo or a list. Anything you can via an email, just list a few things on the email, that'd be wonderful. You can put them under individual headings, that's fine. We're not going to go through that now. Okay, I'd like to see what you can do on your own with that. Okay, so we have the knowledge and application check now. So I'd like you to pause the video and I'd like you to have a go at this knowledge and application check. Okay, so question 1, define the term health. Health is a state of physical and mental well-being. You'll be asked this question a lot, so you do need to learn it. State 2 lifestyle choices that can affect health. Well, there's a lot of these. Diet, exercise, smoking, drinking alcohol, I put drinking but I mean alcohol, drugs, amongst others. If there's anything else you think, you can check with a parent or an adult at home, or send me an email if you're not sure. Define the term risk factor. Again, you'll be asked this one regularly. So it is something that increases your chances of getting a disease. Question 4, state a risk factor for type 2 diabetes. So we've got obesity, which is in turn caused by poor diet. So either of those. If you've put high fat diet, that's fine, but obesity, either of those is great. Question 5, state the risk factors that can affect babies in utero. Okay, so these are smoking, alcohol, and drugs. All 3 of those will have an effect on a baby in the womb before it is born. Quite nasty effects, some of them. How many people die each year due to disease? Well, we did list this earlier, but you don't need to know this, but it was tens of millions of people, okay? But it's a very vague answer. You just need to know that a lot of people die each year due to disease. Okay, so that's worldwide. It varies by country. Which is the biggest blood vessel in the body? It is the aorta. We haven't yet covered that, but you do need to know that. And the heart pumps to which places? Again, we haven't yet covered this, but you should know it from Key Stage 3. That is the body and lungs. Okay, so we're going to move on to this graph. Okay, and I'd like you to look at the graph. You'll need to see the colour version of this for it to work, because this is blue, green, yellow, orange and red. You may want to look at this on a screen to help you be able to answer these questions. Have a go at each of these 3 questions, please. I need to pause the video whilst you do that. Okay, let's go through those. In 2002, what was the biggest killer? So we're looking at deaths due to chronic illnesses here. So we've got the biggest one is this blue section, which is cardiovascular diseases. And that is around about 15 million. And then if we look at the injuries and communicable diseases, we have in this side, definitely above 15, we've got injuries. So in fact, injuries were the biggest killer in 2002. What is the trend for the number of cancer cases globally? Okay, so cancer is the green section. So we have this here, this section here, and this section here. So what we can say is that it appears to be increasing. So the number of cancer cases is increasing or increases. Question 3, describe what the graph tells us about global deaths. Okay, so on this graph for chronic illness, global deaths are increasing each year. For the injuries and communicable diseases, the difference here is small on this, but on average, it's decreased to 2020. Certainly injuries have decreased. Communicable diseases, less so. So what we can say is for certain, chronic illnesses are increasing. Okay, so that's one point we can definitely make. Our next point is that injuries have decreased. But we can say then that communicable diseases have increased. Okay, so there's 5 key points there. So give yourself a mark out of 5 for this one. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so what I'd like to do is on your student notes page, draw a table that details the risk factors such as diet, amount of exercise, alcohol, smoking, carcinogens, those are cancer-causing chemicals, and the diseases they cause and the potential effects of that risk factor. Now, you don't have to do it in this way. You could do a little bit of research into this using the internet. I don't really mind how it's done. But you need to have a look at in more detail the risk factors and the diseases that are caused by these risk factors. If you can make a couple of paragraphs worth of notes or half a page worth of notes, that would be wonderful. Okay, so that is the end of this lesson.